We've always said that the SELCO service catalog should be flexible and not carved in stone, that as we add services and they get used a lot, that maybe we would consider making those more available to people. We've also said services that outlive their usefulness or don't get used a lot should be purged from the catalog. Sometimes we've done a pretty good job of that. Sometimes it's been a little more static than we would have liked. But we are getting ready to make some changes to the service catalog right now to more adequately serve the needs of the libraries. So before we get started on that, though, just a few basic definitions. There are 3 kinds of services we offer, and some of you have probably heard this 100 times. So this is a good time to check your email. Basic services are those that all online libraries get. They're part of your basic automation fee. We consider them ubiquitous. You really can't be an online library or media center without them. Horizon being a really good example of that. And then we have value-added services. Those are services that are still useful to many libraries and media centers, but we can't call them ubiquitous enough to foist them on everybody. So these are the optional things. This is the a la carte stuff that you pick off the menu. Things like, for example, PC support would be a good example of that. And then we have special projects, which are anything that doesn't fit into the other categories. Things that are just really one-off. A library needs something that no one else needs, or they need something that is so specifically tailored to their environment that it's just not really applicable to anyone else. And those we contract separately one-on-one with the libraries. So we are getting you ready to make some changes to the value-added services package. And the first one is an exciting new service that Becky is going to tell you about.
All right. Cheryl and I have kind of discovered over the course of a number of different projects, most notably the OCLC project, which most of you have either gone through or are in the process of going through, and through our updated cataloging training for RDA, that we needed to take a look at our value-added service, which used to be called vendor loads. For those of you in schools, you know what that is. You order your material shelf-ready. It comes with marked records and the item information attached to it. Your vendor sends it to us. We upload it for you. We do the cataloging for you. And when you get your box of books, voila, you open up the box of books, you check it in, and the books are ready to go on your shelf. You don't have to go through the process of finding records for that. Originally, the service just included vendor loads, but now we've changed it and updated it to incorporate regular cataloging that doesn't come to you through your vendor loads. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means. We decided to update this service because through our RDA training, we've been talking to a lot of school librarians. And a lot of school librarians we found are ridiculously pressed for time. They've got 2 buildings that they're bouncing between. They've got a million things to do at the CERT desk. They're trying to balance any classes that they teach, teachers who come in and want them to do things for their classes. There's a lot of things going on there. We also noticed through doing cataloging for Dewey Day that we were getting a lot of items from schools, and we were hoping that through this particular switch in the contract, we'd be able to get your material on your shelves sooner so that your patrons can actually start using them rather than getting a book, say, in March and then waiting for the following Dewey Day to send it in because you either can't find the record or don't have the time to do it. I was looking at some statistics, and for last Dewey Day, 88% of the items that schools sent in were either already in Horizon or were able to be directly imported from OCLC. And that's a lot. That's a lot of items that could have gotten on those shelves a lot quicker. A lot of records that get created by a single school, like I said, are pretty small, only 140 in a year. Over half of our schools don't create any cataloging records outside of their vendor loads. So we started thinking, how can we update the service to include both regular cataloging for the stuff that you get outside of vendor loads and your vendor loads. So we're starting a pilot project. It starts tomorrow for the schools that already get vendor loads. There's been a contract that's been sent out to the schools who already get vendor loads. You know who you are. And depending on how well this goes, we may be extending this offer to schools who don't get vendor loads and possibly eventually to some publics, depending on how quickly I get buried under stacks of books in my office. So what we're doing with the service is that we're continuing the assistance with vendors and vendor loads. We're still going to load your MARC records. Your items are still going to show up in your catalog. We're still going to contact all the vendors when something goes wrong or we don't get your records. You say, hey, I want to make a change with how my vendors are loading my records. We're still going to do all of that. In addition to that, we're adding new cataloging service. Each individual school building, so if you're in, like I know Rochester-Peterson has 3 buildings, you can send 20 pieces of material per month per building to us. We will catalog them, send them back to you with the bib number on the front, just like you do for Dewey Day. You add your items, you're good to go. Our price structure is based on those cataloging numbers that I referenced before and the amount of schools per district, and hopefully you all find this valuable. We don't get overwhelmed with material, and we'll be able to go from there and see what happens. Any questions on that before I turn it back over to Donovan? Fabulous. If you're a school here who gets vendor loads and you want to talk to me more about this program, talk to me after the meeting, email me, and we'll see what we can do.
Thanks, Becky. The other change we're going to make mostly affects public libraries, and that is to our wireless internet access value-added service. Effective on January 1st, we're killing it. It's dying, it's going away. But do not despair, because we are moving support for public Wi-Fi to our basic service package. So it will be available to everybody at no additional fee over your basic automation fees. So why are we doing this now? As some of you may be aware, the Sonic Wall routers that we have at public libraries are all approaching their end of life. We just learned this about 6 months ago. They will all no longer be supported next year. So we are replacing those. We're doing half of them this fiscal year, and we'll be doing the other half in the next fiscal year. For the same price that we paid for these devices several years ago, we can now get routers that incorporate Wi-Fi. So that was what really got us to thinking about whether this was time to make the change. This will present us with a number of opportunities. Having Wi-Fi integrated directly into the router, as opposed to using a separate access point, makes it easiest for us to secure the traffic. We won't have to do quite so much messing around with your network structure to make sure that the traffic from Horizon, which has patron data, is segregated from the public Wi-Fi. We can do that within the device much more easily, much more effectively. It will also make it a lot easier for us to roll out features like statistics and splash screens that patrons have to go through in order by acknowledging your acceptable use policies. Those are services we do provide now with the value-added service, but we have to do them through third parties, and they're not the most elegant solutions I've ever seen. They take a fair amount of work for us to set up. They're not all that usable at your end, and as a result, very few of the libraries getting wireless access actually make use of those. In fact, I know of at least one library that's actually created their own completely separate solution. Hi, Alan. So it will be a lot easier for us to incorporate features like that. And it will also lower the cost for online libraries. You will no longer have to purchase your own access point in order to provide wireless. Now, if you already have, that's fine. You can continue using that, but eventually that device is going to wear out. So you're not going to have to purchase a new one when that comes. mentioned a moment ago, we're going to be implementing this over the course of the next 2 fiscal years. We're replacing half the sonic wall this year and the other half in fiscal 2016. We're going to do the online libraries that are already using the value-added service first. That contract runs January through December, so our goal is to have all of those implemented by the end of this calendar year, so that the value-added service they're using now will just stop on December 31st, and starting in January, you'll just start getting Wi-Fi through the equipment at no additional cost. Now, there will be a few libraries, and you probably know who you are, that are going to be a little more complicated than that. Alice, for example, at Plainview has got a very cool solution set up for statistics and other management. She may not want to use our Wi-Fi and completely redo that. That's okay. No one is going to be forced into this. Just because it's a basic service, you don't have to use it. If you've got something else, that's okay. Some of you are dealing with city IT departments that have certain requirements for how your network works. If this doesn't work for you, that's okay. We'll keep working with you and them just like we always have. There's a few libraries that have got very individual setups involving 2 internet service providers, either for bandwidth reasons, because the local providers just don't provide enough, so we have to have 2 separate companies involved, or for other reasons. We'll handle all those on a case-by-case basis, but the bottom line is we're not going to wreck what you've already got in place just for the sake of providing you with a basic service. So if you're doing something unusual, don't worry. We will work with you on that, and we're not going to force anything down your throat. But for the vast majority of libraries, we think this will be a really useful thing. Now, most of our libraries are small enough that the sonic wall should be able to provide good Wi-Fi coverage throughout the entire building. But there are going to be a handful of exceptions, either because the buildings are larger or they're old Carnegie libraries that are basically made of brick and steel, which is not exactly conducive to Wi-Fi. When we run into cases like that, we'll figure that out on a case-by-case basis. If you already have a wireless access point, we may talk to you about reconfiguring that to be a repeater or a booster. If we have to buy something to make that possible, we'll do that too, just like we buy other network equipment. So we'll work that out on a case-by-case basis. That's where Tom comes in. When I say we, I mean Tom. Let's just be real clear about that. And that's really all I have to say about that. Any questions or comments on either of these changes? Yes?
Right now, so our Wi-Fi goes to Charter. So once we switch over to this, is Charter still a provider? Or
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this will not change the internet service provider that is getting your Wi-Fi out to the internet. It just affects the equipment in your library that patrons will be using to connect. That's a good question. Any other questions? I wasn't going to talk about this, but since we are running just a few minutes ahead, I will go ahead and throw this out here. We have always said we wanted to keep our service package fresh, evolving, not static. And while that's always been a goal, this time we wrote it into our strategic plan. So this is one of the many tasks that we have in the strategic plan for the next 4 years, to periodically revisit the service catalog and make sure that we're making these changes so that the catalog is still most effectively serving your needs as you serve your patrons. So I can't really say we did this because of the strategic plan, but this is the kind of thing that we're supposed to be doing. So this will be going down in that as we move forward. Okay. We are way ahead of schedule, which is okay. Nobody ever complained about a meeting getting out early, or maybe we'll have extra questions at the end. But why don't we go ahead and take a short break. Tyler, how long did we have our break set for?
10, I believe.
Okay. Well, why don't we stick with that just because we never know what might come up. So why don't we come back at 10:30 and we will carry on with library publicity on Facebook. We'll go ahead and get started again. Before I turn things over to Renee, I just needed to make a quick housekeeping announcement. Somebody just pointed out to me that in the slideshow we just did, it says that the change to the value-added wireless service will take effect in January of 2013. That, of course, is incorrect. It'll be 2015. I'm not sure what exactly I was thinking about when I typed that. So we'll correct that, but having said that now, we will turn it over to Renee, who is going to talk to us about Facebook.